Growing up in Chicago, wasn't really aware of black gospel music, and I was a huge fan of R&B and a huge fan of the Staples singers in particular. But I had no idea they were gospel. I just heard them on the AM radio, and AM radio in those days kind of sounded like that. It was really dull and boomy, and car radios sounded like bad jukeboxes. So, I mean, a lot of detail, like lyrics, tended not to hear very well. But we got the Staples into our studio up there at one point. Stax was coming unglued, and the Staples were looking for a new label. They had got a bite from Atlantic, I think, or I think it was Atlantic. Anyway, they needed to come in and get like 3 songs down, better than demos, but 3 songs. So they booked 3 days with us, and to my astonishment, we got to work with them, and it could not have been cooler. I mean, it was just like, and it really was at that point I realized from listening to the songs that, well, these guys are a gospel group. I had no idea, and but all of them were delightful. Pops was really a king, and Mavis, man, it's all about Mavis. So anyway, that was in Chicago. In Charlotte, working for the Davis Sound Place I described, I mean, part of the work was going out with either little mobile truck, which had a 10-input rotary fader mixer and a 2-track Ampex in it, or hand carried, which usually meant a couple of Revox tape deck or 2, and some kind of tiny mixer or just 2 mics or whatever. But anyway, early on I got a job to go record something at the First Baptist Church in Wilmington, I think it was, or somewhere out there, and I drove on out and looked in the yellow pages, no internet or smartphones, and so saw First Baptist Church. I went there. Nothing was happening, and they explained it was the other First Baptist Church. What other? Anyway, so he explained finally to my dull Yankee butt that there's a white one and there's a black one, and I was heading for the black one. So cool. All right. So anyway, that was my introduction to gospel churches, and I immediately fell in love. I have to say, I'm really not a religious guy particularly, and but I don't know how anybody can withstand the barrage of positive energy and just vibe and just total heart in the middle of that kind of a thing. And I was immediately a fan, and those were some of the jobs I really sought out. Anyway, back to gospel. So here's me, the Chicago boy in the little recording truck, and I find the First Baptist Church, and everybody's totally nice, and we rig up. And in those days, in the 70s, even almost into the early 80s, a gospel church often had a microphone, and that somehow got into a speaker, and that was it. So it's not like I was bringing really high-tech stuff in. The truck, like I say, literally had a 10-input mixer with rotary, round faders, and it did have pan pots, and then there was a time, even into the 70s, when a pan pot, where you adjust where things were left or right or whatever, was not on all mixers. The first mixer at Reflection they told me about, a Unidyne, didn't have pan pots, and they added some outboards. It was like a special thing. So you have to understand how basic a lot of this stuff was. So the mixer was a 10-input, 10x2, so it fed into stereo. And then there's an old Ampex tape machine where the mechanical part, the transport, was from the 50s, and then the amplifiers were newer. And a pair of speakers, Dynaco speakers, and an amp. That's pretty much it. So I had no video connection. I had 3 spools of cable. One was power, and I just plugged into an outlet to run this truck. And then the second one was a microphone cable, which was, I guess, the 10 mics. And then the third one was a communications thing that had pretty well given up the ghost before I got there. But it led to a box that had standby, recording and playback, and a speaker to talk through. But the speaker never worked while I was there. Anyway, So I couldn't see anything. I'm out there in the truck, but what we would do is, because the mic that they had was important, the most important people were used to singing and speaking into it. I used to carry these little 1-by-1-inch blocks of wood, because it was a pretty good guarantee that there was a big old ground spark going to happen between my stuff and their stuff. So I would take my mic for the leader and set it back a couple inches from the grill of the church's mic, because I figured it'd be better if they're not chewing on my mic too, just for sound quality. And then I would put that block of wood on it to separate the two mics and run some tape around them, and that would be the main mic. Then I had 9 mics I could put elsewhere, and those weren't very organized projects as a rule. It was a big old joyful noise kind of thing, and usually about the time we're getting ready to record, somebody's going to come running in the door with a keyboard under his arm going, "I want to play," and so I would just have them start plugging into guitar amps, because I hadn't any more mics or anything, so plug it into something that makes noise. Let the rest of you do something, whatever you do it at a microphone. So I did a bunch of those, and kind of caught the vibe, but it was the lowest of low budget, and really, after starting at Reflection, we did stuff we were really excited about, like all the Don Dixon projects and Mitch Easter projects, like REM and Dixon's band Arrogance, and lots of stuff like that. Jamie Hoover and I had a production company doing rock records for the most part. But the cash cows there that really kept the rent paid oftentimes was PTL. PTL had a big TV production set up, but they had never invested in the hardware to actually mix their orchestra live on camera. So they could do vocals, but they couldn't handle doing this whole orchestra they had. So they would send the orchestra up to Reflection with charts, and we would record everything that you heard on the air except the vocals. And what we would turn out would be a 1/4-inch reel of tape, and one track, since it was all mono TV at that point, one track would have the music of this orchestra performing, kind of a Tonight Show kind of swing band kind of thing, and the other track would have counts and clicks and cues and whatever. And so that was for years, and we did tons of that stuff. And so again, some of the experience I'd got on other earlier projects at Davis or wherever really paid me off, because they'd bring in string sections and stuff, and I knew what to do. But anyway, and along with the sort of church choir stuff at Reflection and many other studios, the package deal mostly for gospel groups was a common thing. In those days, typically a group might pay, this is going back the early 80s, the package might be $1,600. It would include 500 albums in some kind of a generic cover and 8 hours in the studio. So this typically be quartets, Southern, which are the Pale Faces, or Black Gospel quartets, either way. And so they, in 8 hours, it almost seemed like a luxury on some of these things, but nowadays people, 8 hours an album, but yeah, absolutely. So we were working with multi-track tape, even 24-track, but what we'd do is we'd get everybody set up and sounding good and happy, and we'd run through the whole album and get recordings on the first pass of the whole album, and then wind it back and or reload the first reel and double the backup vocals on all the songs. And with the kind of equipment we ran, MCI equipment for the most part, it was possible to actually work on getting the mix while I was recording, which was essential, because within that 8 hours I had to mix this record. And so at the end of 8 hours we had a record, and after a month or so they'd get 500 copies. And so that was there were some weeks you'd get several of those. There were a lot of them. By the middle 80s, late 80s, those had faded out, mostly because record costs had gone way up, which made the package deals go way up. So it got to the point where we were just trying to help people with the recording, let them go find their own record pressing plant. So that was it.